Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses as we continue with part 3 of The Phoenix by Manly P. Hall, Bodhidharma, Patriarch of Zen. Bodhidharma, 28th Patriarch of Buddhism and founder of Zen. Arriving at the place called the Vulture's Peak, Gautama Buddha seated himself and surrounded by his disciples and the creatures of the 7 worlds, discoursed upon the Parjanya Paramita, or the elements of transcendental wisdom. The discourses given at Rajgriha are preserved as among the most important doctrines of the Mahayana school, which is now called the Great Vehicle, as the Illumined One thus sat, revealing the doctrine of enlightenment. A Brahmaja approached. Bowing low before Sakyamuni, he placed in his hands a glorious golden lotus blossom, beseeching the eternally enlightened one to preach the Brahma, or the good law. Thereupon the gathered disciples and even the saints in heaven bent forward and listened attentively for the words of priceless wisdom. But the Buddha remained silent, gazed serenely at the lotus flower. After several moments, the aged and venerable disciple, Mahakasyapa, smiled slightly. He had sensed the mystery. Buddha turned intensely to Mahakasyapa, saying, "I have the wonderful thought of nirvana, the eye of the right law. You alone have perceived this, and to you I now transmit the whole treasury of Brahma. Be thou also enlightened." In this way, so tradition declares, the sect of Dhyana, the order of silent instruction, was established. It is one division of Buddhism which, by refusing to become committed by word or symbol, has preserved throughout the centuries the true spirit of great instruction. From Mahakasyapa, the first patriarch of Dhyana, the drama descended from sage to sage along an unbroken line of meditating masters. Each is presumed to have communicated the law to his successor without word or outright sign, until finally at the beginning of the 6th century it was entrusted to the keeping of the Patriarch Panyatara, a teacher of rare gifts and attainments. Of Panyatara, a curious incident is told. He was invited to an ancestral memorial feast that the assembled guests might hear and profit by his words. To the amazement of those present, he did not follow the accepted Buddhist custom of reading from the scriptures, but simply remained silent. When questioned as to the reason for his unusual conduct, he replied, "Neither the breath which I draw in, nor that which I exhale produces any effect upon material things, nor would my breath, laden with words, have any greater merit, since my heart and body are always with Buddha. Sleeping, waking, or working, I am constantly receiving his influence and have no need to read his words." It was the Patriarch Panyatara who in the stillness of meditation revealed the mystical doctrine to the Bodhidharma, who thus became the 28th Patriarch and the greatest exponent of Dhyana, or the science of enlightened meditation. It was Bodhidharma, often called the militant monk, and the blue-eyed Brahmin of princely birth, who brought Dhyana to China, from whence, according to tradition, it reached Japan in the 7th century, where it is known as Zen. The meaning of the word Zen, according to the master himself, cannot be understood even by those possessed of wisdom. It implies a mystery which can only be revealed to those who have achieved it. To the esoteric, the term must always remain simply a word conveying the thought of discovery of self and the contemplation of that reality which is the foundation of every illusionary nature. Men do not study Zen. They achieve it through the actual process of becoming it. It is not taught as we understand teaching, but is communicated as a state from those who possess it to those who are capable of receiving it. Zen as a meditation for the becoming of self. Bodhidharma was in every respect an extraordinary personality. His body of huge and ungainly proportions was rendered more pronounced by his haughty mien and commanding gestures. 2 great piercing eyes blazed out from under shaggy brows, and he affected a short grizzly beard and heavy golden earrings. His strange proportions and menacing manner lent a fearsomeness to his whole appearance. By older writers, Bodhidharma has been likened to an awkward growling bear who spent his time sitting in some desolate spot mumbling and grumbling to himself. He is never depicted as smiling or happy, but as glowing upon the world from behind the folds of his cape. In spite of all this, however, if his face be carefully studied, there is evidence of a deep kindness and a gentle understanding concealed beneath the rough exterior. Like many other patriarchs who have renounced worldliness for the realities of the contemplative life, Bodhidharma was utterly indifferent to his personal appearance. His body was covered in a tattered robe, usually shown as either saffron or red in color. Although the traditional robe of the Zen patriarch is green, never before had such an apparition been seen crossing the mountains separating India from China. There are differing accounts regarding his mode of travel. According to some traditions, he walked the entire distance to bring the law of enlightenment to China. Again, he is referred to as the navigating Brahmin and is supposed to have arrived there on a ship. Regardless of his mode of travel, however, the consternation caused by his arrival coming to the attention of the imperial house, he was summoned to the palace. It is in no way amazing that the Emperor Wu, the mortal son of immortal heaven, a good man and a pious Buddhist, should desire to meet and converse with this most remarkable sage. We therefore next discover Bodhidharma in the imperial audience chamber of the Emperor of China, standing before the high gold and lacquered throne veiled by its silken curtains. No ingratiating priest was Bodhidharma, groveling for royal favors. He retained his aggressive and uncivil attitude, answering gruffly and indifferently the questions of the emperor, one in his resolution to humiliate this personification of imperial power. The emperor speaks. Most reverend sir, we have built temples, caused copies to be made of holy scriptures, and ordered monks and nuns to be converted. Is there any merit in our conduct? No merit at all, growled Bodhidharma, from somewhere in the midst of his rags. Though unaccustomed to such answers, the emperor continued, "What then is the whole truth or the first principle?" Again the patriarch growled enigmatically. The first principle transcends all. There is nothing holy. It then seems the emperor reasoned thus to himself before speaking. If there is nothing holy, what then is the state of this saint who confronts us? So he speaks once more. Who are you then who stands before us? And for the last time, before turning his back upon the palace, Bodhidharma muttered, I do not know who I am. Metaphysical distinctions such as these were utterly beyond the comprehension of the imperial mind, weighed down with the cares of state, and to whom the state must have seemed very real. So the Bodhidharma, realizing that his teachings were too profound to receive imperial favor and support, resolutely turned his back upon the forbidden city and retired into the distant Shaolin monastery, where he sat in meditation for 9 years in a small yard with his face towards a blank wall. For this achievement, the Patriarch earned for himself the name of the Wall-Gazing Brahmin. But the Bodhidharma was not there for the sole purpose of meditation. He was awaiting the perfect working out of the law. He knew that dhyana was the royal road to selfhood, and that men in their desire to attain truth would ultimately discover him. It was merely a matter of patience and realization. What a strange picture is conjured up when one thinks of this grim-faced saint bundled up in his robes, gazing fiercely day in and day out at an undecorated wall and kicking out of his presence with appropriate snorts and grunts anyone who dared to interfere with his meditations. Day after day he mumbled and grumbled, and these 9 years have become the subject of numerous legends, many of a most profound nature. According to one account, he remained seated in one position so long that spiders spun their webs all around him and rats made nests in the folds of his cloak. According to another story, He remained without moving for such an extended of time that he entirely lost the use of his leg, which withered away. In commemoration of the latter incident, Dharma is now depicted by Japanese artists with a body in the form of a sack sans all trace of legs. His disgruntled visage piercing out, accusing upon the world from the neck of the sack. Bodhidharma has been styled the Chinese St. Anthony because during this long period of meditation, every form of temptation and discomfort was visited upon him. After he had been sitting alone for approximately 3 years gazing at the wall, he is said to have become so tired that without realizing it, he fell asleep. His slumbers were disturbed by astral visions and the sorcery of evil creatures conjured up by Mara, the Lord of Unrealities. At last, the elemental creatures bothered him so much that he awoken with a start, and discovering that he had been asleep, a weakness most un-Zen-like, he cut off his own eyelids as a penance. In some pictures, this peculiarity has been carefully noted. When he cast his eyelids upon the ground, tradition affirms that they become tea plants. Having thus strengthened himself by his penance, Bodhidharma remained awake and in meditation for 5 more years, when again fatigue overtook him. Casting about for something to dispel his drowsiness, Bodhidharma noted the tea plants growing nearby. Leaning over, he picked a few leaves from one of them and, after chewing the leaves, discovered that they removed his sense of fatigue. Since that time, tea has been widely used by Zen monks as well as other holy men who desire to remain awake during long periods of meditation. The lazy monk. At last, the Patriarch was rewarded for his long vigil. A man sorely perplexed, hearing of the meditating sage, came to him in search of knowledge. But Bodhidharma, who realized that the path of achievement was only for the strong, refused to receive the visitor and gruffly ordered him to depart. The man, however, was not thus easily discouraged and remained standing for days in the snow, refusing to leave until the interview was granted. After waiting a long time and receiving no invitation, this pilgrim cut off his right arm and sent it to the Bodhidharma. The Patriarch of Zen instantly realized that the stranger possessed the sincerity and consecration necessary to the great achievement. So he ordered him brought into his presence and there received him as a disciple, bestowing the discipline upon him. The unprepossessing exterior which many of the old Zen priests developed was cultivated for one purpose alone, to discourage those who aspired to become disciples. Only the one who possesses the discrimination to pierce through external appearances and discover the underlying reality was regarded as worthy to receive enlightenment. Bodhidharma therefore accepted those whom he could not frighten away, kick away, or repel by sureliness or abuse. Zen was for the strong and not for the weak, for the resolute and not for those who could be easily intimidated. The essential elements of Zen Buddhist have been summed up under 6 general headings, a brief survey of which will reveal the high integrity of the discipline. 1. The practices of Zen are fully as old as Buddhism. Some believe much older, for the method of practicing dhyana, or meditation, as cultivated by these monks has descended from the teachings of the most ancient recluses of India. The origin of these spiritual processes is hopelessly obscure. 2. In spite of its great antiquity and its even more astonishing profundity, the doctrine of Zen is particularly applicable to present-day conditions. It is distinctly a practical rather than an abstract cult. For this reason, it has unquestionably come to be so highly favored by the best educated and cultured people of Japan. 3. Zen rejects in toto the importance of scriptural authority or tradition, affirming that truth can never be communicated by outward method, but must be realized internally by the mind. When the mind of the teacher is in rapport with the mind of the disciple, the mysteries are silently communicated, and in this way alone has the esotericism of Zen been transmitted for over 26 centuries. With its rejection of the scriptures, Zen also rejects prayer, fasting, and the observance of monastic rites. Those who perform such acts are worshipping only the phantom of truth. 4. Zen also rejects the historical existence of Buddha, declaring that there can be no such person as Buddha inasmuch as personality itself is an illusion. To the true Zen, Buddha is a state of consciousness, not a man. Nor are Buddhas regarded as gods or supermen. In fact, the Zen monks sometimes speak pityingly of the Buddha as a man who was in bondage to the gold chain of belief in enlightenment. There is an absolute in the teaching of Zen into which all personalities are absorbed. The contemplation of this is the greatest good. 5. Zen is not an idolatrous doctrine and, like the original Buddhistic system of Gautama, preserves such an exalted concept of deity that less enlightened minds are inclined to view the entire system as philosophic atheism. Tana, who was a Zen teacher in the 9th century, is said to have warmed himself when he was cold by making a fire out of the statues from a nearby temple. To him, symbols had nothing to do with spirituality or truth, but hopelessly confused the elements by encouraging man to accept the image for the real. A conception of Dharma. 6. Zen has a curious method of expressing profound realization or some deep religious insight by an odd or inconsequential gesture or act. The Zen monk may symbolize the achievement of some high state of consciousness by lifting a brush from a rack, by tapping with his fingers upon the back of a chair, by some gesture of his hand, or even by slapping a man in the face. It has been said that Zen monks have roundly boxed the ears of emperors. There is a story illustrative of Zen teaching recorded in Robert Cornell Armstrong's recent publication, Buddhism and Buddhists in Japan. A temple officer once asked EQ, a famous Zen monk, if there were such places as heaven and hell. The priest replied in the most abusive language, calling the officer a fool who lived off the temple but was ignorant of its teaching. He even went so far as to call him a robber and a brute and unworthy to be a samurai. The official, being a man of honor, refused to take such abuse, even from a priest. So drawing his sword, he ordered EQ to explain himself or be cut down. The priest, who had retired out of danger, laughed at the angry official, exclaiming, "You ask where is hell? Your mind is hell. I see hell in your face." The samurai, sensing the lesson, became conscience-stricken and regained his former amiability, whereupon the priest, noting his flaccid features, remarked, "You ask where is heaven? Your mind is heaven now. I see heaven in your face." In his Buddhist art, M. Anzizaki writes of Zen, "The chief effort of this sect was directed towards the attainment of spiritual enlightenment through personal experience in contemplation, and the efforts of this practice were shown in manifestation of strong individuality. At the same time, a feeling for the tranquil beauty of nature produced a serene air rhythm of transcendence over the incidents of human life. Unlike most of the Oriental metaphysical disciplines, Zen is not a negative procedure. It is the achievement of tranquility and strength rather than in weakness, and because of this peculiar vitality of the teaching, nearly all the patriarchs of the order have enjoyed extraordinary health and lived to great age. It has well been written that the obliteration of matter by the exercise of absolute knowledge is the secret of Zen. Zazen, the tranquil session or method of Zen meditation, is thus described by Kizan in Zazen Yojin Kai. Arrange a seat of matting at a suitable place and lay a cushion upon it. Then sit down crossed-legged, placing the right foot upon the left thigh and the left foot upon the right thigh. Put on robes and a girdle, not too tight, and preserve their symmetry. Then put the right hand, palm upwards, on the calf of the left leg. Lay the back of the left hand upon the palm of the right hand, and let the tips of the two thumbs touch each other. Sit thus, keeping the body erect, inclining neither to the right nor to the left, bending neither forward nor backward. Let the ears be just above the shoulders, and let the nose be directly towards the abdomen. Lay the tongue against the roof of the mouth, and keep the lips and teeth closed. The eyes should be kept open. The breath should flow gently through the nostrils. When the bodily position is thus established, exhale a deep breath. Then remain seated after, having examined the posture, swinging the body slightly to the right and left. Thereafter proceed to the contemplation of what is beyond thought. Bodhidharma in meditation. The eccentricities of Bodhidharma and his enigmatical method of teaching endeared him to the few who understood the workings of his brilliant mind. As in the case of Pythagoras, most men, however, hate mysteries, and the Patriarch made many enemies among those unable to comprehend his metaphysical speculations. Like Socrates, the grand old master of Zen was loved by few, hated by many, and feared by all alike. On at least 3 different occasions, priests of rival sects made efforts to poison Bodhidharma, but in each case his great knowledge enabled him to frustrate their designs. It is not amazing, therefore, that he was regarded as being divinely protected, and the ignorant assumed that he possessed some magical secrets for the indefinite extension of life. Wisdom, however, does not bestow freedom from law, but rather freedom under it. Like the great men who had gone before him, the blue-eyed Brahmin passed from the scene of mortal action. When after a long and intense life, the time came for the Bodhidharma to depart into the law, we discover him the same fierce appearing but mysterious old man, still huddled in his voluminous cloak and surrounded by the monks and nuns whom he had converted to dhyana, the doctrine of meditation. With his great rumbling voice he speaks thus: "And now the time of my departure is at hand. Say unto me, one and all, how do you understand the law?" Then reverently the assembled brethren spoke, each in turn summarizing what he had gained from the teachings. One disciple, Daofu, answered, "To me it seems that the law does not lie in the letters, nor yet is it separated from the letter, but it works." Bodhidharma nodded gravely and replied, "By your realization you have obtained my skin." Then a nun, Sung Chi, spoke up saying, "As Ananda, the beloved disciple of Buddha, achieved the firmness of thought but once or twice, so I understand the law." Bodhidharma nodded slowly, as though pondering the words, and then replied, "And by your realization you have obtained my flesh." Another to speak was Dao Yua, a great student. His words were thus: "The 4 elements are unreal from the first. Nor are form, perception, consciousness, action, or knowledge really exist. All is emptiness according to my view." Again Bodhidharma inclined his massive shoulders, mumbling in his cloak, "By your realization you have acquired my bones." The last to be called upon for his understanding of the law was Wai Ko, who, after making a most polite obeisance, sat a little distance and, assuming the position of meditation, gazed silently at Bodhidharma for several minutes. The aged patriarch was very still also, and then leaning forward he whispered, "By your realization, you have in silence attained to my marrow." Bodhidharma then took the great green cloak of Zen and spread it over Woiko's shoulders, proclaiming him the next patriarch of Zen and pouring into the vessel of his soul as into a new pitcher the everlasting waters of the law. 3 years after his death, a strange story began to be circulated concerning Bodhidharma. Some peasants from the hill country had seen the fierce-looking philosopher plodding on his way amid the western mountains of China, his face resolutely towards India. He was barefoot, but for some inexplicable reason was carrying one shoe in his hand. The number of persons reporting this circumstance so greatly increased that the story caused such consternation that it came to the attention of the Emperor of China, who, to settle the matter, caused the tomb of Bodhidharma to be opened. To the amazement of everyone, the grave was empty except for one shoe, the mate to the slipper that Bodhidharma had carried away. On the strength of this story, it had been affirmed that the great Zen monk never really died at all, but having completed his labors in China, employed the subterfuge of death as a convenient method of disappearing. In Japan are found many curious images of Bodhidharma. In some, he is shown with his clenched fist raised above his head in a pose of utter exasperation. In others, he is depicted walking with stately tread, carrying the much discussed shoe. In still other carvings, he is shown standing on a millet stalk, some say a great leaf of the ashai tree. The latter picture refers to the account, probably apocryphal, of Bodhidharma's visit to Japan. He is declared to have crossed the Strait of Korea, either walking upon the waters or standing on this leaf which had become an enchanted skiff. Bodhidharma is often used in Japan as a pattern for children's toys. No other great philosopher seems to have suffered so many indignities at the hands of the public as this old Zen monk, and yet there is something very profound behind it all. In kite flying season, his strange staring face gazes down from countless paper birds. Among the familiar toys modeled from him are the little trembling egg-shaped figures, sometimes called by American children Humpty Dumpties. These are weighted at the bottom so that no matter which way they are knocked about, they always bob up serenely. By their peculiar faculty of righting themselves under all conditions, these tumbling dolls, strangely enough, are very appropriate symbols of the Zen tradition. Zen is the doctrine of equilibrium, demanding a balance of all elements of life as the prerequisite to spiritual understanding. Students of metaphysical subjects would do well to emulate the Zen attitude of silence towards esoteric matters, for not the least important of Bodhidharma's teachings is that very evident fact that the true secrets of life can under no circumstances be communicated from one person to another, and that all who try to express outwardly the secrets of the law expose themselves as ignorant of those secrets. Nagasena likens man to a tree, the branches and leaves of which are moved by the winds of excess which disturb the tranquility of the outer life. The trunk of the tree is the mind which the wind cannot move. Let us use Nagasena's own words. The branches of a tree are shaken by the storm, but the trunk remains unmoved. In like manner, as the mind of the arhat is bound to the firm pillar of the samadhi by the cord of the four paths, it remains unmoved even when the body is suffering with pain. Zen teaches that the immovability of reason is the hope of man, for while the outer senses and perceptions are hopelessly inconstant, the mind within is capable of being so established on the eternal foundations of realizations that the vicissitudes of the outer life have no effect upon the serenity of the inner existence. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.